Strange Historical Mistakes. Hi, I'm Professor, your history storyteller, and today I'm inviting you on a journey, not to a battlefield, not to a royal palace, but to tea rooms, banquet halls, and velvet chairs with gold trim. Places where history wasn't written with swords, but with rules. Yes, you heard that right. There was a time, in the world of Victorian ladies, where simply smiling with your teeth, speaking a little too loudly, or choosing the wrong color of gloves could cost a woman her place in society. Forever. Sounds bizarre? The truth is, a lot of these mistakes from the past aren't so different from the things we still stumble over today. Posting the wrong status. Wearing something different from the crowd. Saying the wrong thing at the wrong gathering. And then, that feeling of being looked at differently. Have you ever felt that? I once had tea with an elderly woman in Toronto. She told me, "My daughter's 30. She's single, independent. People always ask, what's wrong with her? But I think she's braver than I ever was." History isn't always found in textbooks. Sometimes it hides in the glances, in the whispers, and in that quiet sense of not being enough, just because you chose to be yourself. In this video series, we'll uncover the strangest historical mistakes, from curtsying the wrong way, to using the wrong spoon, to, yes, even sitting in the wrong chair. But this isn't about laughing at the past. It's about realizing that some rules, though outdated, still quietly linger today. They just wear new clothes. And in our very first episode, we'll start with something that seems harmless. A carefree smile. Just one loud laugh, one moment of showing teeth, was enough to erase a woman's name from every guest list that mattered. What do you think? A single misplaced laugh, and her reputation, her future, her world, gone. Like steam rising from a forgotten cup of tea. I'm Professor. Come along with me as we walk through the series Strange Historical Mistakes, where small gestures shaped entire eras, and maybe, just maybe, help us understand ourselves a little better today. Episode 1. A Smile Too Wide, when joy became a social crime. Imagine this. You're sitting in a candlelit room. The walls are lined with crimson velvet. A grandfather clock has just chimed 4 o'clock. On the table, silver teacups, steam curling from the spouts, perfectly arranged biscuits. Everyone is dressed immaculately, their faces calm, restrained, as if even one misplaced emotion could crack the stillness. And then, a sound breaks the silence. Laughter. From a young woman sitting by the window. Not a polite chuckle, not a tight-lipped smirk, but a real, full, joyful laugh. Crisp and bright, because something genuinely tickled her. And just like that, the room freezes. Eyes turn, a brow furrows, a silver spoon is quietly set down. And by the following week, that young woman, she's never invited back. Why? Because she smiled with her teeth. In the Victorian era, some of the most ordinary things we take for granted today, like laughter, posture, or the color of your dress, were once seen as silent declarations. They weren't just actions. They were statements about your class, your family, your worth. I'm Professor, and in this series, Strange Historical Mistakes, we'll uncover the tiny things, almost invisible, that once determined a person's fate. Today we begin with what might be one of the most absurd and yet haunting. A smile with teeth, and the hidden cost women once paid, just to be accepted. Let me ask you, have you ever been judged for something small, like laughing too loud or saying something a little too honest. A friend of mine once told me when she was growing up, her parents always reminded her to laugh just enough. Don't speak too loudly in front of guests. And above all, be gentle. Otherwise, no one will respect you. She's now a highly educated, successful woman. But even today, those rules still echo in her mind, like an invisible script she can't erase. And it made me realize history is never really gone. It's a mirror, showing us why we live the way we do today. So, in this episode, we're going to explore why was a simple laugh, something so human, turned into a symbol of disgrace? What kind of pressures were placed on women to silence even their happiness? And if you've ever felt judged just for being yourself, then this video is for you. Because right after this, we'll step into the heart of the story, a spontaneous smile, and a party invitation that never came again. 1. Laughter could be dangerous. If you were a woman, laughter is one of our most natural human expressions. Babies do it in the womb. It's how we bond, connect, and express pure joy. So, why did it become something women had to hide during the Victorian era? The answer is found in 3 words: rules, image, and boundaries. In the 19th century, a woman didn't just represent herself. She was the face of her family, her father's name, her husband's dignity, her lineage's reputation. One misstep, laughing too loudly, tilting her head too freely, revealing even an ankle. And people wouldn't just judge her. They'd whisper about her entire family. 2. History rarely recorded those who laughed, but it always judged them. While researching in a library in Boston, I came across a letter from 1875. A young woman wrote to her mother, describing a tea party. A friend had laughed, really laughed, while telling a story about a new hat she'd bought. The hostess, a powerful society matron, didn't say a word. But next week, that friend vanished from every guest list. No one explained, but everyone understood. A proper lady must never let emotion overshadow elegance. 3. Laughter and gender. When being yourself is too loud. Have you noticed? Even today, girls are often told to laugh politely. Don't be loud. Stay graceful. A man laughs loudly. He's charming. A woman does the same. She's too much. She's unladylike. She's embarrassing. One of my college friends, now a lawyer in New York, told me, "I once laughed during a lunch with partners. A male colleague said, 'You laugh a bit loudly for someone aiming to make partner.' Funny thing is, just a day earlier, our male boss laughed his head off in a meeting, and everyone called him personable. See the double standard? We're still living with the ghost of that Victorian smile. 4. Being a Victorian lady equals playing a lifelong role. It wasn't enough to dress the part. You had to perform it, perfectly. Every gesture was a line in a silent script. The way you stepped, the way you held your teacup, where your eyes landed, even your laugh. Etiquette books at the time explicitly warned, a lady must not laugh with abandon. Emotion must be measured and tastefully restrained. A good woman smiled modestly, lips closed, eyes soft, no sound. Like a camellia in fog. Beautiful, still, and scentless. Because even joy could be too much. 5. Sound familiar? The invisible smile rules still exist. Have you ever stopped yourself from laughing loudly at a formal dinner? Ever caught someone giving you that look because you were just being yourself? She's a bit much. She seems a little unfiltered. A woman should be more composed. Yeah, I've heard those too. Modern society may be freer, But many of us are still stuck in silent rules, unspoken, but deeply felt. Laughter used to be punished. Now, it's tested. 6. Reclaiming laughter is reclaiming yourself. I once interviewed an 82-year-old woman in Montreal. She said for 60 years she had always laughed softly because that's what her mother taught her. Her husband liked it too, said it made her seem gentle. But after he passed, she joined an art class, and one day, surrounded by other retirees, she laughed. Out loud, really laughed. She told me, "For the first time in decades, I felt like me. Not someone's wife, not someone's daughter, just me." That story stayed with me. Because for so many women, laughter isn't just sound. It's a piece of themselves they've hidden for too long. 7. A small mistake. A lifetime of judgment. Back in Victorian times, a loud laugh could cost you your future. No more suitors, no invitations. You'd be labeled poorly raised. Today, we don't exile people from high society. But we do. Leave them out of group chats. Skip inviting them to dinners. Question their professionalism. Quietly unfollow. The stage may have changed, but the script? Still familiar. 8. So, what do? We don't need to break every rule, but we do get to choose. What does your laugh sound like? Maybe it's soft, maybe it's loud, maybe it fills a room, or maybe it's just a breath through your nose. Whatever it is, make sure it's your choice, because laughter is a sign of being fully alive. You don't need permission to feel joy. I'm Professor, and in our next video, we'll meet a woman who lost everything because she sat in the wrong chair at the wrong tea party. One seat, one mistake, and a whole social life gone. You'll see, chairs aren't just for sitting. They represent place, power, presence. Stay with me for more strange historical mistakes, where even the tiniest moments speak volumes about who we were and who we still are. Episode 2, The Wrong Chair, the End of Everything. Have you ever walked into a room full of strangers and hesitated, wondering where to sit? Sometimes it's something so small, an empty chair, a curious glance, an unsure invitation. You choose a seat, only to realize later you weren't meant to sit there. Today, it might only mean a few minutes of awkwardness. But back in the Victorian era, especially if you were a young lady, sitting in the wrong place could cost you your place in society. And sometimes, your carefully planned future. Let me paint a picture for you. It's afternoon tea in London, late 19th century. The room is lavishly decorated. Camellias, lace cloths, butter biscuits. Every guest was carefully chosen. Mostly noblewomen and debutantes. No one arrives late. No one sits down without knowing exactly where. Every seat, at the table, by the window, on the gilded sofa, has already been assigned. Not officially, but understood. Now imagine this. A young woman, Eleanor, attending her first high society tea. She sees an open chair and sits right next to Lady Montgomery, a powerful woman, and mother to an unmarried earl. What she doesn't know is that this seat was unofficially reserved for a potential candidate, someone quietly pre-selected. By sitting there, Eleanor unintentionally breaks a silent code. She is seen as bold, overstepping, maybe even desperate. No one says anything, but she's never invited back. And in that world, not being invited meant you no longer existed in polite society. Sounds harsh, doesn't it? A chair, a moment, a single misstep. But in a society built entirely on etiquette, even where you sit could be seen as a declaration of where you think you belong. And I believe that hasn't really changed. Have you ever sat in the wrong place, metaphorically? Applied for a role others thought was above your level? Spoke your mind too soon in a room full of superiors? Wore something you loved, only to be looked at like you didn't belong? A friend of mine, a designer, once attended a pitch meeting with investors. She sat at the head of the table, without knowing that spot was usually reserved for the CEO. No one said a word, but in 5 minutes, the look said enough. Even with her brilliant ideas, she wasn't meant to sit there. She wasn't chosen yet. Welcome back to the series, Strange Historical Mistakes. I'm Professor. And today we'll return to the Victorian era to unpack a single question. How could the wrong chair determine a woman's entire fate? We'll explore the unspoken rules of space and power, the invisible mistakes that cost women everything, and how those old codes still echo in today's world, just in different clothes. Because sometimes it's the tiniest thing that changes everything. The chair, not just for sitting, but for being seen. In high society events, whether tea parties, balls, or family dinners, seating was meticulously planned. Who sat next to whom, who was near the center of the room, and who sat closest to the doors. Every chair sent a message. It could be approval, favor, or an invitation into a future. In a world where women couldn't vote or work freely, sitting in the right place was often the first step toward a destiny not of their choosing, but of their positioning. A true story, one wrong chair, one vanished future. Let's go back to Eleanor. She was invited to Lady Montgomery's tea, a rare and hopeful sign. But by sitting in the seat closest to Lady Montgomery, she unknowingly claimed a position that had already been reserved. Not officially, of course. These things were never said aloud. But everyone understood. Her mistake was seen not as innocent, but as presumptuous. She had placed herself where she wasn't yet welcome. Eleanor wasn't scolded. She was quietly ignored. A week later, no more invitations. Modern echoes, the new chairs we can't always see. We may no longer sip tea with earls, but we still have social seating. Who gets a seat at the boardroom table? Who gets to speak first? Who's invited into decision-making groups? I once mentored a student named Julie in New York. During a panel discussion, she accidentally sat in a chair meant for a guest speaker. No one corrected her, but the tone of the room shifted. She later found out she was quietly left off the list for future internship interviews. Just like that. One chair, one lost opportunity. Why we obsess over position? Psychology tells us that humans crave belonging. We speak like the group, dress like the group, and yes, sit in the places that feel approved. In meetings, those closest to the boss are seen as next in line. At home, sitting near parents often reflects emotional closeness. Whether in 1850 or 2025, a seat is never just a seat. It's status, it's permission, it's recognition. If you've ever sat in the wrong place, you're not alone. Let me say this to you. If you've ever stepped into the wrong circle, joined the wrong meeting, said the wrong thing, and felt invisible, misplaced, or misunderstood, it's not because you were wrong. It's because the system was never built to include everyone. A chair doesn't define your worth. Think about it. A single chair, something so simple, once decided the entire future of a woman. Not because the chair was magic, but because society assigned meaning to it. The real tragedy? It wasn't the mistake. It was the fear of making one. Today's story isn't just about tea parties. It's about the pressure to fit in when no one ever told you the rules. So if you've ever felt like you sat in the wrong seat in life, if you've walked into a room and felt the stares, felt like you didn't belong, felt like maybe you were just too much or not enough, let me tell you, you are not alone. Maybe that chair was never meant for you, not because you aren't good enough, but because it wasn't big enough to hold your truth. And sometimes, standing up, even if it feels awkward, is the first step toward finding a space that truly fits who you are. A question before we go. How many things have you changed about yourself just to fit into a chair that was never yours to begin with? Next episode, the look that killed a future. In our next story, we'll talk about something even smaller than a chair. Just one glance, a misplaced look during a party, and how that tiny mistake got a young woman erased from the noble marriage list. Forever. Sounds absurd? But in societies filled with unspoken rules, and maybe even in ours today, a single glance can say more than we intend. We'll explore the rules of eye contact in the Victorian age and ask, is looking down always humble? Is looking up always bold? If this video resonated with you, please subscribe, share, or drop a comment below, because telling history about is one way to heal the present. I'm Professor. See you in episode 3, where one look opens a door or closes it forever. Episode 3, a glance in the wrong direction, and her whole life changed. Have you ever felt like a single glance from someone could throw off your entire day? Some looks warm us, some make us shrink, even when no one says a word. We live in a world that seems free, but often we're still being ruled, not by laws, but by eyes. I'm Professor, your historical storyteller, and today I want to take you back to the 19th century, to a world where just one misplaced glance could end your future. Sounds extreme, right? Maybe even exaggerated? But in the upper-class society of Victorian England, France, and even Canada, every glance had a hidden meaning. A look held too long, or too short, or at the wrong person, was remembered. No one would say it out loud. But behind closed doors, society's doors quietly shut, and you'd never even hear the click. There was once a young lady. She was trained to perfection for an elite ball. Her dress was impeccable, her posture graceful, her manners textbook. But during a polite conversation, her eyes happened to linger, just a moment too long, on the fiancé of a very powerful woman. A few weeks later, she vanished from every invitation list. No scandal, no drama, just erased. Just because of one look. Have you ever felt that? That you've done something wrong, even if no one said so? Maybe it was when you spoke a little too honestly, or laughed too loud, or wore something different from the crowd. Sometimes, all it takes is one moment, one expression, and you feel like you don't belong. Today's episode isn't about gazes from poetry. It's about glances as social power, and how even today, in subtle ways, we're still watched, judged, or even excluded. Not by rules on paper, but by rules written in glances. Welcome back to Strange Historical Mistakes, where small gestures shaped entire lives. Main content, when a look meant more than words. Let's paint a scene together. You're standing in a grand ballroom lit by chandeliers, velvet curtains, live music, the scent of perfume and champagne in the air. Around you are ladies in stunning gowns, their expressions composed, calculated. and eyes that don't wander without reason. In this world, a glance isn't just a glance. It's a signal, a declaration, sometimes a mistake. One glance, one mistake, one lost future. Let me tell you about Margaret Ellingsley, a real young lady in 1864 London. She was well-bred, educated, and had everything prepared for her debut into high society. At a formal dinner, Margaret's gaze paused, just a second too long, on a young man who, unbeknownst to her, was being considered for marriage by another family. And just like that, whispers began. Not loud, not direct, but powerful. Within weeks, Margaret's name disappeared from every guest list. The next season, she was still single, which for a woman in her position and time was considered a failure. All from a single look. In Victorian times, there were unspoken codes, especially for women. You couldn't look at a man too directly. You couldn't glance at someone unless you'd been introduced. You couldn't even express interest unless you were given permission to. A lingering glance? That was seen as flirtation, and flirtation, without status or promise, was a threat to reputation. Today you might think, that's ridiculous, we're past that now. But are we? Imagine this. You're in a meeting, and you look confidently at your boss while making a point. Some might admire your assertiveness. Others might think, who does she think she is? Or at a dinner party, you make eye contact across the table a second too long. It's not flirtation. You're just engaged. But later, someone might ask, did you see the way she looked at him? We may not wear corsets anymore, but we still live inside invisible ones. Studies from Berkeley University found that 67% of first impressions come from eye behavior. How we look, when we look, and at whom. A confident gaze in a man? Leadership. A confident gaze in a woman? Aggressive. Still. And let's be real. Most of us have trained ourselves to look correctly depending on who we're with. Don't hold eye contact too long, or it's rude. But don't break it too fast, or it's weak. Smile, but not too much, or you seem unserious. Margaret's world might feel distant, but the game, the unspoken rules, they've just evolved. In that way, history isn't a dusty old book. It's a mirror, reflecting how we still respond to one another, and often how we still judge or feel judged, for things as small as where we let our eyes rest. I once shared Margaret's story with a group of young people, and one of them raised their hand and asked, "So, how are we supposed to look the right way?" I paused for a second before saying, "Honestly, I don't think anyone really knows, because the problem isn't in how you look, it's in how others choose to interpret it." Margaret didn't do anything wrong. She just looked. But in a world full of rules, especially for women, even the most natural gestures are quickly labeled, not based on what you meant, but based on what someone else thinks you meant. And the truth is, we're still living in that kind of world today, just wearing different clothes and using newer language. Have you ever felt misunderstood just because you looked the wrong way? Been called cold, too much, or inappropriate, just because your gaze didn't meet some invisible expectation? If you have, you're not alone. History teaches us this. Even the smallest glance can carry massive judgment. And if your gaze has ever been misread or misjudged, please remember this. You're not the problem, because you looked. The problem lies with those who fear what your eyes might truly see. Blush too bold, the price of missing the social cue. In the next episode, I'm going to share another story. One that sounds even more harmless than a wandering gaze. A woman who wore her blush just a bit too bold. Sounds silly, right? But in the Victorian world, blush wasn't just makeup, it was a statement. Too light? You were seen as dull, lifeless. Too bold? You were labeled provocative, or worse, low class. And at one elite soiree, just because her blush was the wrong shade, one young woman was never invited back again. Ever. You might think, surely we've moved on from caring about things like that. But ask yourself, when was the last time you were judged, just because of how you dressed, how you looked, or simply because you didn't blend in? Episode 4 is going to dive into one big question. Are we still censoring ourselves, just to fit into a context that no one ever explained? I'm Professor. Thanks for being here with me for Episode 3 of Strange Historical Mistakes. If these stories make you stop and think, please hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, or share this video with someone who's ever been misunderstood, just for being unapologetically themselves. Because, as I always say, telling history is sometimes how we start healing the present. See you in Episode 4, where one swipe of blush might just redefine someone's entire status in society. Strange Historical Mistakes. Episode 4. The Wrong Blush Shade. The Cost of Missing the Moment. When blush was never just about makeup. Let me paint you a picture. It's a winter afternoon in London, 1874. The sky's gray. The wind hums gently outside fogged-up windows. Inside, a warm, candlelit room filled with the soft scent of jasmine tea, a group of young ladies are gathered for the Danvers family's winter afternoon tea, a gathering hosted by one of the most respected families in all of Mayfair. Spoons lightly tap porcelain teacups. Nods, soft smiles, faint furrowed brows. Every gesture is coded. Everything is a performance of subtlety. And then, Margaret enters. Her dress is a lovely pale blue. Her hair, neatly styled. But there's just one thing. Her blush. It's a little too pink. Just a touch bolder than what the moment calls for. No one says a word. There are no critiques, no direct glances. But throughout the entire gathering, no one invites her to play cards. No one brings up her name in any conversation. And 3 weeks later, Margaret doesn't get the winter ball invitation. Even though last year she was one of the most sought-after guests, all because of one detail. The color of her blush. Why would something so small lead to such a quiet but brutal exclusion? Well, that's the story I want to tell you today. In the Victorian era, every color, every swipe of makeup meant something. Today, you might wear burnt orange or cool nude just because it suits your vibe. But back then, blush wasn't just beauty. It was morality. It was class. It was understanding the unspoken rules. And in a world where silence spoke volumes, choosing the wrong shade could mean choosing the wrong life path. I remember sitting once on a wooden bench at a Victorian fashion exhibit in Toronto. Right in front of me was a set of old makeup tools. A blush tin, a silver hand mirror, and tiny delicate brushes. Inside the lid was a set of instructions. Apply softly, according to skin tone. Too red equals like a stage actress. Too pale equals like someone sickly. Sounds kind of ridiculous now, doesn't it? But in that world, blush wasn't just about beauty. It was a social test. Why was blush so dangerous? We live in a time where self-expression is celebrated. Your lipstick, blush, brows, it's your style, your call. But in Victorian society, a wrong shade didn't just make you look off. It said things about you. That you were pushy, vulgar, maybe even unfit to be a wife. Wearing the wrong blush wasn't just poor fashion taste. It meant you didn't understand the power dynamics in the room. You wanted attention. You were unknowingly challenging the hostess's authority. Things no one said aloud, but everyone silently judged. The story of Florence, and the blush that spoke too loudly. Florence was the only daughter of a wealthy silk merchant family. Rich, but not old money. At the Ashford family tea, she wore a tasteful gray dress, her blush a lovely pomegranate pink. It looked amazing on her. But unfortunately, that shade was considered too bold, too loud, too suggestive. The verdict? A silent one. The mothers of eligible bachelors said nothing, but they said everything in their silence. One woman whispered, "She looked like a diary girl." That was enough to quietly erase Florence from every matchmaker's list. The psychology of makeup, even today. In the book Beauty Sick by Renee Engeln, studies show women are trained, over generations, to read even the tiniest makeup details on others and judge them for it. I've taught history to teens, college students, and retirees. And there's one thing I always tell them. History is often written by unspoken rules. Blush then. Filters now. Sounds outdated, right? But are we really that different today? Victorian blush has become TikTok filters. Now it's about glass skin, baby blush, natural brows, but perfectly shaped. Videos don't get hate for content. They get judged for off-trend makeup. I had a student once skip a big interview because someone told her she looked too done up. All she wanted was to feel confident, because her acne had just flared up. And that's when I realized Florence's story isn't ancient history. It just changed shape. A slightly wrong blush, a misread glance, a compliment said to the wrong person at the wrong time. In the world of Victorian women, the tiniest details had the steepest price. And if you think that only belonged to the past, ask yourself, have you ever posted something real and people twisted its meaning? Worn an outfit you loved and felt someone's judgmental stare? Spoken freely and then felt out of place in a room you thought you belonged to? We are still living in a world of invisible context, rules no one says aloud, but everyone's afraid to break. Back then, Victorian ladies learned to choose their blush to match the occasion, the people, the expectations. Today, we learn to shade our personalities. Not too loud, not too soft, and definitely not out of line. Just like Eleanor, the woman you've been following through this whole series, she simply wanted to be herself, but had to perform, just to be accepted. And the bigger question still remains, are we still performing today, without even realizing it? I don't tell these strange historical mistakes to scare you. I tell them so we can wake up a little more and see just how much freedom and pressure we carry in the way we show up in the world. And now, get ready for episode 5, the mistimed hello, how one greeting changed a woman's entire future. That's right, one simple hello to the wrong person at the wrong time, and a woman's carefully planned future was lost. Just like that. Ever been misunderstood because of a friendly message? A warm tone people weren't ready for? A hello that came off as too much? Yeah. We're going there next time. I'm Professor, your storyteller of history. And if any of these stories made you pause or feel seen, don't forget to like, comment, or share this with someone who's ever been misjudged, just for being themselves. Because, as I always say, telling history is one way we start healing the present. See you in episode 5, where a greeting could shift the course of everything. Episode 5, the off-key. Hello, when a simple greeting shifted an entire fate. Hey, it's me, Professor, the one who tells you old stories that somehow always feel new again. In a world where words are seen as signs of wisdom, The way you say hello, who you say it to, when and how, can actually become a turning point in your life. Let me paint you a picture. You're at an afternoon garden party. In your hand, a warm cup of tea. Around you, calm chatter, soft music, elegant dresses. A young woman walks up, in a delicate pastel dress, and with a voice just a bit too familiar, says to a well-respected gentleman, "Good evening, sir. I've heard so much about you." That's it. Just one line. Not rude, not inappropriate, just casual. But that one line got her banned from every high society event, forever. Why? Because that man was the husband of a countess sitting 2 chairs away. Because that woman didn't have enough status to greet him first. And because, in that world, people judged words not by their intent, but by your rank. Now I know what you're thinking. This is the 21st century. You can DM anyone, greet someone on a Zoom call, leave a comment. But let's be real. Even today, not every hello is harmless. A casual greeting at work can cross lines. A birthday message to the wrong person might spark drama. A friendly chat at a party could make someone step back. Back then, a hello wasn't just polite. It was a statement, a reflection of your upbringing, your place in society, your awareness of the rules. So in this episode, we're going back to uncover why one innocent greeting could cost a young lady her reputation, her marriage prospects, and her seat at the table. A hello was never just a hello. If you met someone new today, what would you say? "Hey, nice to meet you." "Hi, I've heard about you." "Good morning, how's it going?" Friendly, right? But in 19th century England, France, even Canada, in the drawing rooms of the elite, a greeting was like a social test. Who you greeted first equals your understanding of hierarchy. Whether you smiled, bowed, or spoke equals your upbringing and gender expectations. Mess it up? It wasn't a small mistake. It was a social error code. A lady must never initiate. One golden rule. A young lady never greets a gentleman first. Not unless she's been officially introduced by someone of equal or higher rank. The Etiquette book, The Habits of Good Society, 1859, says it clearly. A young lady must never presume to introduce herself. Her dignity lies in being properly introduced. It didn't matter if the gentleman was a family friend, your best friend's husband, or someone you admired. Greeting him first? That was seen as inviting attention, unladylike, undignified. One young woman in Bath, 1862, lost her engagement simply because she smiled and said hello to a colonel before anyone had formally introduced them. The art of silent greetings. Sometimes it wasn't even about speaking. In Victorian society, most greetings were done without words. A slight nod for men. A delicate curtsy for women. A subtle glance. Slow, quiet, perfectly timed. But if you glanced for too long, too warmly, or, heaven forbid, looked directly at someone above your status, you'd hear whispers like, "She stared at the Duke like they were old lovers." Yes, that was a real quote, from Lady Rose's journal, 1874. The worst mistake? Greeting the wrong person. Want a real story? In 1855 in Sussex, a young lady named Elizabeth Hartley attended her first elite party. She saw a man in a formal suit standing near the door, welcoming guests. Thinking he was the host, she curtsied and said, "Thank you for the kind invitation, sir." Problem was, he wasn't the host, he was the butler. The room fell into an awkward silence. Then, soft chuckles. The real host smiled politely, but never sent her another invitation. And in high society, no invite equals no existence. Modern times, same game. Think these rules are dead? Try sending a happy birthday message in a group chat to the wrong person, or thanking a boss in a public comment thread and getting radio silence from the whole team, or just saying hi to someone in public and seeing them look at you like you've overstepped. The truth is, Today's society still plays by unspoken rules. Break them, no one scolds you. They just quietly close the door. Greeting right, a life skill. People often say, just be yourself. And yes, authenticity is key. But awareness is the bridge. In history, the most beloved figures weren't loud. They were timely. They knew how to greet, when to speak, and when to stay silent. A lady who knew when to nod, when to look down, when to pause, was seen as virtuous, graceful, and marriage-ready. Sounds strange now, but it was real. And today, whether it's online DMs, job interviews, or networking events, your hello still sets the tone. My friend's student. A friend of mine teaches high school in Toronto. She told me about a brilliant student. Sharp, kind, talented. But he never greeted anyone first. Not out of arrogance, but out of fear. Fear of being judged, of doing it wrong, of being misunderstood. Just like Elizabeth Hartley. One awkward hello, and he shut down for months. In the end, same hello, different stage. The world has changed. Corsets became blazers. Teacups became Zoom screens. But a hello? Still the first unlock to any connection. How we greet, who, how, when, still shapes how we're remembered, how we're trusted, and whether the door opens or shuts. Final thoughts. A greeting is a mirror. In a world shouting, be yourself. We still need grace, because greetings, the small ones, lead to big questions. How do I see others? How do I react when I'm ignored? Am I opening doors or building walls? History may not have chapters about greetings, but it was often shaped by them. A nod started a marriage. A glance ended a future. And today, a mistimed emoji or message could change the course of your career. I don't share these stories to scare you. I share them to wake us up, because in every era, the most elegant thing we can wear is still kindness and attention to others. Next up, the dress that shined too bright. In the next episode, I'll share a real story. A woman attended a ball in a gown that was too bright, too beautiful, too perfect. And because of that, she was shut out of high society forever. Why? Because back then, no woman was supposed to outshine the hostess. And today, we're still living with versions of that rule. So don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, and share this with someone who's ever been misunderstood. Just for being themselves, I'm Professor. And remember, history isn't just to admire. It's to understand ourselves better. See you in Episode 6, The Miscolored Dress, The Trap of Standing Out. Episode 6, The Miscolored Dress, The Trap of Standing Out. Hi there. Let me paint you a picture. You receive an invitation to an exclusive high society event. You prepare carefully. You choose the most beautiful dress you can find. You walk into the hotel and heads turn. You feel like you're glowing. But 3 days later, no one invites you back. Why? The dress. It was just a few shades brighter, a little too vibrant, a little too eye-catching compared to what the hostess wore. Back in the Victorian era, that was a silent accusation. Lacking tact, lacking humility, lacking awareness. And the consequence wasn't a lecture. It was being silently removed from the upper-class circle. I'm Professor. And today, we step into a story about a dress. But this isn't just about fabric. It's about a social boundary. An unspoken message about rank, ambition, and judgment. So today's episode isn't just about fashion. It's about a whole system that decides who gets to shine and who must fade quietly into the background. Welcome back to Strange Historical Mistakes, where even the tiniest actions could change a life. A friend once told me, the fancier the setting, the more power the smallest things have. And in the world of Victorian ladies, That wasn't just true, it was law. In Victorian high society, there existed an unwritten dress code, passed down not through documents, but through whispers from mothers, aunts, and long-serving maids. Break the silent rule, and you'd face real consequences. A dress that was the wrong color, a piece of jewelry that attracted too much attention, a design that accidentally competed with the hostess. Any of those could change your status, from honored guest to social exile. I once read in the Journal of Lady Charlotte from 1858. She shared how she wore a pale rose dress to a tea hosted by her powerful aunt, who happened to be wearing a silver-gray lace gown. Her pink dress, a bit brighter than expected, was seen as a challenge. The result? Charlotte was quietly excluded from winter tea invitations that year. It took her 3 full seasons to repair her reputation, all over a color choice. Sounds absurd, right? A color, meant to show personal style, became a silent accusation of trying to steal the spotlight. That was the sweet trap of standing out. In that world, showing up too dazzling didn't get applause. It raised suspicion. What is she trying to prove? Is she aiming for that eligible bachelor? Is she trying to outshine the hostess? The right dress, in the right tone, at the right time, could elevate you. But the wrong tone, the wrong message, it could be the end of your social climb. Now, let's jump to today. You walk into a PTA meeting or a professional seminar, dressed a little more brightly than everyone else. Can you feel the glances, the whispered comments? Even if no one says anything, you know the vibe has shifted. That, my friend, is the modern-day ghost of the miscolored dress. Someone once asked me, so women back then couldn't be themselves? Sadly, not fully. Personal taste, aesthetic, and self-expression all had to be weighed against your social role, family ties, and who held the power in the room. A lady who understood the rules would wear something harmonious, subtle, beautiful, but not bold enough to steal the scene. They were taught to shine. Only in the light they were given. I remember speaking with a cultural anthropology professor in Toronto. She said something that stuck with me. In a class-based society, standing out isn't a right. It's a privilege. And privilege has to be granted, not claimed. When you understand that, you realize a dress isn't just clothing. It's a hidden map of social dynamics. Now think back to the last wedding, class reunion, or parent meeting you attended. Did you pause and wonder if your outfit was too much? Did you walk in and feel like the room wasn't exactly welcoming? If so, you felt what Victorian ladies felt 150 years ago. Don't dim your light because others can't handle your shine, but also, don't burn others just to glow. The real lesson of the miscolored dress? It isn't just about what we wear. It's about why we do it. Do we act, dress, and live to impress, or to belong? Many Victorian women didn't want to challenge the system. They just wanted to be seen, remembered, given a chance. But society taught them. Even your brightness can become a threat if the room wasn't built for it. I think about young people today, the ones who wear what they love only to take it off because it doesn't fit in. The ones who speak up with brilliant ideas only to be met with silence. The girls who post a confident photo, then delete it after one rude comment. The miscolored dress is still here. It's just no longer in the closet. It lives in unspoken expectations, silent judgments, invisible pressure to shrink. But I also know this. There are people today who dare to stand tall, even if they don't match. They're not trying to be dramatic. They're just refusing to disappear. Being seen isn't a crime, but hiding because others are uncomfortable. That's the real tragedy. So after this episode, I hope you wear what you love. Live what you believe. And if someone says, you're too much, just smile and say, I'm not trying to stand out. I'm just not trying to fade away. Next episode. Bare hands. When forgetting gloves meant forgetting yourself. A pair of gloves might seem simple, but once upon a time, they were the line between being seen as educated or being labeled unworthy of a second invitation. In Episode 7, I, Professor, will take you into the unspoken rituals of the upper-class handshake. Because sometimes offering a bare hand wasn't just rude, it was a rejection of an entire social class. I'll see you in the next episode, where small things once again reveal the big stories of humanity. Episode 7. Bare Hands. When forgetting gloves means forgetting yourself. Hi there, I'm Professor. And today, I want you to picture this. It's a cold afternoon in London, 1887. A tea party is in full swing behind velvet-covered walls and warm golden candlelight. Ladies and gentlemen glide past each other, ivory gloves on, heads gently bowed, exchanging quiet, elegant greetings. Then, she walks in. Her dress is perfect. Her hair is styled just right. Her smile is soft and poised. But her hands? Bare. Just that. A tiny detail. And suddenly all eyes shift. From warm curiosity to silent judgment. From interest to instant disapproval. Why? Because she wasn't wearing gloves. Now, that might sound silly to us today. But in the Victorian era, gloves weren't just accessories. They were social statements. They marked the line between someone who was invited and someone who would never be invited again. Have you ever experienced something like that? Dressed right, but in the wrong color? Said the right thing, but not at the right time? Gave your all, but still got labeled as awkward over one small thing you didn't even notice? Whether it's the 1800s or today, we all walk through a world of invisible rules. Rules no one teaches you, but everyone judges you by. So no. Gloves aren't outdated relics. They're symbols. Symbols of what happens when we forget a small, silent rule and get told we're not enough. In this episode, I, Professor, am taking you into a world where a thin layer of fabric could decide a woman's status, her reputation, and even her future. And then I'll ask, what are our gloves today? What are the quiet expectations we carry without even realizing? If you're ready, let's dive into the heart of the story, where hands reveal hidden layers of class, culture, and control. Back in Victorian society, everything had a reason. Nothing was random, especially what a woman wore when she stepped outside. A hat too low, a necklace too shiny, or a bare hand without gloves could change how people saw you. And not in a good way. Gloves back then weren't just to keep warm or look fancy. They stood for morals, virtue, and most of all, class. Wearing gloves said, I don't work with my hands. My skin is untouched by labor. I belong to a certain world. A true lady never showed bare hands in public. It wasn't just about hygiene or fashion, it was about control, self-control. Because bare hands are vulnerable, uncovered, too real. While gloves, they're a soft disguise for dignity. One etiquette book from 1855 literally said, never, ever show your bare hands in someone else's home, even if they're family. I once visited a small museum in Bath. There, behind glass, were lace gloves from the 1800s, so delicate I didn't dare breathe too close. The card underneath read, worn by Eleanor Montgomery at her debut ball, 1862. You see, it wasn't just a glove, it was proof that she had been accepted, that she belonged. But what happens when a lady forgets her gloves? Well, news travels fast. One story tells of a young woman, daughter of the Earl of Sussex, showing up to a New Year's party, elegantly dressed, perfectly behaved, but with bare hands. And that one detail? It erased all future invitations. No one said anything, but everyone knew. That's the thing about gloves. They became invisible walls between those who knew the rules and those who didn't. Now you might ask, okay, but what about today? I once had a brilliant student, sharp, kind, well-prepared. But during an internship interview at a big Toronto firm, she wore open-toe sandals. It was summer. Harmless, right? She didn't get the offer. And the feedback? Seems like she doesn't understand what a professional setting requires. Not ability, not experience, but a silent rule. A missing modern glove. In today's world, we still wear invisible gloves. When you post something too long and people call it oversharing. When you speak from the heart and get told you're too sensitive. When you don't smile at the right time or stay quiet when you should have spoken, you're being judged by unwritten codes. Gloves aren't fabric anymore, but they're still barriers. And if you've ever felt not enough, even when you tried your best, maybe, just maybe, you walked into the room without knowing the gloves you were supposed to wear. Back in the day, even compliments were dangerous. In the Victorian era, a compliment wasn't just polite. It was a test. A double-edged sword wrapped in velvet. Say the right thing? Doors open. Say it the wrong way? You could lose an entire season's worth of social invitations. Sounds ridiculous. But haven't you been there? Posted a sweet caption, only to be mocked? Gave someone a compliment, and saw their smile drop? Tried to do the right thing, only to be misunderstood because it wasn't the right time or the right person? History isn't just in textbooks. It's in that tiny sting in your chest when your sincerity doesn't land the way you meant it to. But listen, don't let that stop you from being kind. Just be kind with care. Let your heart lead you, but be wise where it lands. Because if we're going to spread anything in this world, let it be kindness, even in a world that sometimes forgets how to return it. And if you thought history's mistakes were all about gloves and gowns and tea parties, just wait. In episode 8, we'll step into the silent footsteps of the servants. The people who never got named in the history books, but quietly held the fate of entire aristocratic families in their hands. A wrong glance, a step too loud, one careless whisper in the wrong hallway, and it was over. Their job, their reputation, their future. I'm Professor, and I'll see you in the next episode, where we don't just talk about the ones history remembers, but about the ones it forgot. Subscribe if you haven't already, because this journey is just getting started. And remember, history isn't just about the winners, it's about all of us. Episode 8, The Invisible Footsteps, when women weren't allowed to make a sound. Hey friend, I'm Professor, and today I want you to imagine this. You're standing inside an old manor. The wooden floors creak softly under every step. But today, you're not allowed to make a sound. Not because someone's sleeping, but because you're a woman. And in Victorian times, even the sound of your footsteps could define your future. One click of a heel down the hallway, one creaky stair. That was enough for people to decide. She's careless. She's not refined. She's not fit to be a lady. In that world, women had to walk like they didn't exist. They had to glide, softly, without disturbing the air, without reminding anyone they were alive. I'm Professor, your storyteller of forgotten histories. And today, we're traveling back to a time when a young girl had to learn how to walk like a ghost. Just to be accepted. Just to avoid the whispers. Just to stay on the guest list. Or in the marriage pool. But this story, it's not just about the past. Because even now, there are still so many people, especially women, living like they're not allowed to make noise. Not allowed to speak up. Not allowed to walk boldly through life. And sometimes, society convinces them that staying invisible is the safest choice. Today's episode isn't just about walking. It's about being seen. Or more accurately, not being seen. Let's begin with a door. This door doesn't lead to a grand hallway. It leads down to the kitchen stairs. And in thousands of Victorian homes, it marked the boundary between two worlds. On one side, chandeliers, piano music, polished laughter. On the other, clinking silverware, burning wood, tired feet, and quiet sighs. A typical upper-class family might have 4 or 5 members, but they were served by 15, 20, sometimes even 30 staff, a silent machine working day and night to maintain the illusion of effortless elegance. And the rules? Oh, there were plenty. No footsteps upstairs loud enough to be heard. Never use the front door, even to deliver flowers or mail. Speak only when spoken to. Have no body odor, but don't you dare wear expensive perfume. That would be too much for your status. I once read a letter from 1876, written by a maid named Mary. She told the story of walking into the dining room early to place a vase of flowers, only to run into the lady of the house. She bowed, apologized, still fired the next day. Why? Because her presence had disrupted the refined air of the home. Sound familiar? Maybe you haven't been fired. But have you ever felt like you were too much for a space? Too different for the office? Too out of place in a classroom? Too honest at a dinner party where one story from you made everyone go quiet? That feeling? Victorian maids lived with it every single day. And the strange thing is, they stayed. They worked 16 hours a day. Why? Partly survival. They had nowhere else to go. But partly because they were taught to believe their invisibility was normal. This system didn't just run on strict rules. It ran on internalized values. A good maid leaves no trace. A perfect servant never makes anyone uncomfortable, even when she's in pain. I once spoke with a researcher in Canada, an expert in servant history. She said something that stayed with me. We often think this class was oppressed from the outside. But the truth is, many were bound from the inside. They disciplined themselves, automatically. Discipline turned into instinct. From the magazines they read, the servant training books, the whispered morning reminders. If you do it right, no one notices. Do it wrong, everyone will know. So next time you see a noble woman floating through a ballroom in a film, remember how many hands steamed that gown. Remember how flawless tea parties meant someone stayed up the night before, adjusting tablecloths again and again, until it was just right. That's the power of invisibility. But it's also the pain. Because when you're invisible long enough, you start to believe you don't matter. And so I ask you, are you playing a role that others take for granted? Have you ever felt that if you took just one day off, your house would fall apart, and no one would notice the reason why? If so, you've touched the experience of millions of invisible workers throughout history. Silence doesn't mean you're not important. Every quiet footstep helps the world turn, even if no one hears it. The women who brewed the tea, the maids who slipped through narrow staircases, the soft footsteps that never echoed through grand halls. They were never meant to sit at the table, never meant to be painted into the portraits, but somehow they held the frame together. And the question that has haunted me for years is this: how many people out there today are living like 21st century Janes? The ones who clean up but aren't thanked. The ones who show up early, leave last, but get no credit in the group email. The ones who don't post much, don't speak much, but are always the ones who pick up the pieces when everything falls apart. Maybe that's someone in your family. Maybe it's you. And to you, I want to say this: you are not invisible. Even if no one claps, even if there's no spotlight, even if no one remembers your name at the end of the party, you still matter. History shouldn't just remember the names on the stage. It should bend down, search the shadows, and thank the footsteps that paved the way. Be the person who sees the Janes around you. Be the one who looks them in the eye and says, "Thank you for being here." Because sometimes just one moment of recognition is enough to save a soul slowly fading in the quiet. In the next episode, I, Professor, will tell you about the crooked teaspoon, when etiquette could break a future. Sounds silly, right? But in a world where everything was measured in manners, even placing your spoon the wrong way could rewrite your entire future. We'll explore why sitting right and sipping right mattered so much, and how today we still live under hidden rules, waiting to cancel anyone who steps out of line. Join me in episode 9, where one small spoon asks one big question. How many people were misjudged simply because no one taught them the rules? Episode 9, a crooked teaspoon and a shattered reputation. Hey there, let me take you into a quiet room for a moment. The breeze moves gently through an open window. You hear the soft clink of a spoon hitting fine china. Barely a sound. In that room, a young lady sits upright, posture straight as a candle. In front of her, a perfectly arranged tea set, precise to the last centimeter. Around her, discreet but sharp gazes, watching, judging. Then, she lifts her spoon, stirs her tea, the wrong way, just a bit too strong, and the spoon taps the side of the cup. That tiny sound, seemingly nothing, echoes like a sentence. That same afternoon, her name is quietly removed from the dinner guest list. No explanation, no second chance, just a hushed whisper. Such a pity. She lacks refinement. Ever felt that way before? One tiny thing, an ill-timed message, an off-tone comment, an outfit that didn't quite match the room, and suddenly, a door you didn't even know was open, softly shuts. Today's episode isn't just about teaspoons and tea. It's about the unspoken rules, silent, powerful, and everywhere. The kind no one teaches you, but punish you for not knowing. I'm Professor, and this is Strange Historical Errors, where small details from the past reveal big truths about the world we live in today. Back in the Victorian era, drinking tea wasn't just for quenching thirst. It was a performance, a ceremony, a silent test. And in that ritual, the humble teaspoon became a weapon of judgment. Why did the spoon matter so much? At a proper Victorian tea party, every guest had their own set of tools. Teacup, saucer, stirring spoon, maybe even a little dish for used utensils. But it wasn't about the tools. It was about how you used them. You had to. Hold your spoon delicately, 3 fingers only. No clinks allowed. Stir clockwise. Slowly, gently. Never leave the spoon in the cup while drinking. Always place it on the saucer. And here's the truth. Doing it wrong wasn't just a mistake. It was evidence. Proof that you weren't raised properly. Proof you didn't belong. One wrong move, and you might never get another invitation. A true entry from a noblewoman's diary. In a journal dated 1856, a young girl named Florence from London wrote, "I was asked to leave the tea room when my aunt reminded me I had left my spoon in the cup. I was so ashamed I couldn't look anyone in the eye for the rest of the day." She was only 14, but that small slip-up was considered unforgivable. This tells us something profound. In that society, there was no need for yelling, no public punishments, just silence. And that silence was enough to make someone doubt themselves, hide, shrink. The modern teaspoon. Sounds like a fairy tale? Maybe. But think about this. You're in a meeting. You speak up. Nobody disagrees. But suddenly, the mood shifts. People get polite, but distant. You feel it. You stirred something wrong. That's the modern teaspoon. I heard a story recently from a student in Toronto. She went to a networking event, wore a classic blue dress, and ordered a cocktail no one else ordered. What happened? No one started a conversation. No one said anything. But no one followed up either. Just like that clink of the spoon. Unspoken rules never die. Society changes, sure, but human nature, it still craves systems, subtle ways to decide who fits and who doesn't. And those systems, they're not always loud. Sometimes it's how you shake hands, what you order at lunch, how you react to a joke everyone else laughs at. That's why so often you're not judged by what you do, but how you do it. Have you ever sent an email that was too direct and got labeled as rude? Seemed too excited in a meeting and noticed people pulling away? Laughed at the wrong moment and felt the room turn? That's your teaspoon today. History helps us see ourselves. When I studied Victorian etiquette, what struck me wasn't how harsh it was. It was how familiar it felt. I saw so many young people today, trying to enter new rooms, new networks, new spaces, only to realize there are rules no one warned them about. You learn by guessing, by reading eyes, by surviving the silence, by noticing which chairs never get offered to you again. You know what? I was once in a business gathering, not in the 1800s, just a few years ago, when a colleague grabbed the wrong wine glass. And I remember the looks, the tight smiles, the shift in the air. No one said a word, but everyone felt it. In the old world, it was a teaspoon. Today, it might be choosing the wrong wedding table, eating something too weird for the office crowd, or just saying something not quite on brand. We're not just talking about spoons. We're talking about invisible expectations, the kind that can change your path with one small misstep. And suddenly you wonder, was it really my fault? Or just a broken mold I never agreed to fit into? If history teaches us anything, it's that it was never fair. But when we look back at these strange little rules, we don't just laugh. We learn to look deeper. We learn some standards don't deserve to be followed. Some spoons are meant to be set down. And most importantly, we learn to be kinder with others and with ourselves. Because sometimes people aren't lost. They're just holding the wrong spoon at the wrong table. In the final episode, I'll tell you about a high-born lady. She never made a clear mistake. Always poised. Always polished. Always perfect. And yet, after one holiday season, her name vanished from every guest list. No one spoke of her again. No one explained. Until one line in a servant's journal revealed a truth. That gave me chills. That final episode won't just be about one woman. It'll be the heart of this whole series. Not everyone who's excluded did something wrong. Sometimes, they were just the only one who refused to pretend. See you in episode 10, where we'll answer one last question. Stick to the script, or stick to yourself. Which one is truly worth it? Thank you for staying with me this far. I'll see you soon. Episode 10. The Woman No One Ever Mentioned. Hey there. I'm Professor, the storyteller of all the little forgotten pieces of human history. And today is the final episode. But to me, this isn't an ending. It's a pause. A moment to take a breath and look back at the journey we've just shared. From a smile that was too wide, a chair that was slightly out of place, a dress in the wrong shade, or a teaspoon angled the wrong way. Each of these tiny mistakes didn't just reflect the rigid rules of history. They echo the world we live in today, where being different is still a quiet reason to be pushed aside. And today, I want to tell you about a very particular woman, a proper lady from the Victorian upper class. She wasn't rebellious. She didn't break the rules. She never laughed too loud, never wore the wrong dress, never used the wrong door, never stirred her tea wrong. In other words, she was perfect. And yet, she vanished. No one kicked her out. No one publicly judged her. There was no scandal, no stain on her name. She just disappeared after one social season. No more invitations, No more mentions. No more calls. She was silently erased from society. And it wasn't until 40 years later, in a servant's old journal, that we finally found out the truth. Not because she did something wrong, but because she refused to pretend. I want to invite you to sit with me. No etiquette, no formalities, just honesty. Because in this final episode, we're not just talking about a woman who was silenced. We're asking, in a world that demands performance, who dares to be real and pays the price? Have you ever looked in the mirror and felt like you weren't allowed to be yourself? Not because you weren't enough, but because you weren't the right fit? That was Eleanor Mayberry, the woman we're talking about today. She wasn't a revolutionary. She didn't fight for suffrage. She didn't debate in parlors. She simply refused to fake excitement. During tea parties, when the conversation turned to weather, dresses, or eligible bachelors, she didn't argue. She just stayed quiet. When everyone praised Lady Montgomery's cake, Eleanor gave a small nod. She wasn't rude. She just didn't lie. A childhood friend, Letitia Harrow, once wrote in her diary, "Eleanor was the only one of us who never pretended. Pleasant, yes, but never fake." And that became a problem. In Victorian society, truth wasn't the most valued currency. Agreement was. A proper lady didn't have to be honest. She had to be on brand, on tone, in sync. And Eleanor, by simply refusing to play the part, became inconvenient. At one dinner hosted by the Earl of Harlington, Eleanor didn't laugh at a joke made by a powerful gentleman. She wasn't rude. She just didn't find it funny. 3 days later, her next party invitation never came. A month later, no one mentioned her name. And just like that, she was gone. Like a feather slipping out the window on a breeze. Soft, silent, final. No one spoke ill of her. No one said why. But that's the harshest judgment of all. To be quietly forgotten on purpose. Sound familiar? Have you ever been in a group, and simply because you didn't nod along or fake the enthusiasm, you were seen as distant, difficult, or offbeat? One of my students once told me she was kind, brilliant, hardworking. But because she didn't do small talk and didn't laugh at every joke, she was quietly excluded from her internship group. No one said, "We don't like you." They just never invited her back. Never mentioned her name again. That's the modern language of exclusion. No words needed. Just silence. What made Eleanor remarkable wasn't protest. She never wrote a memoir, never fought back. But 20 years later, someone discovered a domestic skills handbook, beautifully illustrated. And in tiny print, it read, E. Mayberry, Illustrations. She wasn't seen, but she left a trace through quiet integrity. So let me ask you, have you ever chosen not to pretend and lost something big for it? If yes, you're not alone. I know. This may sound like an old-timey tale, but in truth, this story never really ended. The white gloves are gone. The silence is cracking. But the shadow of those expectations still lingers. Maybe you don't have to curtsy at tea or pick the right spoon or match the right dress color. But maybe you still feel out of place because your tone doesn't match. Your laugh isn't quite right. You don't fit the tempo people expect. We've been through 10 episodes together, each one a glimpse into a world where a raised eyebrow or a misstep could change your whole path. And from that, we've learned something very human. Every one of us has, at some point, stepped across an invisible line. Whether in the 19th century or in a modern group chat. Someone once told me, history doesn't repeat itself, but people never stop judging over things that shouldn't matter. So if you've ever felt unfairly judged over something small, if you've ever held back just to avoid being off-tone, then maybe You're not so different from the Victorian ladies we've talked about. And maybe this series, Strange Historical Mistakes, isn't just about corsets, or teacups, or chairs. Maybe it's a reminder that in this world, being different should be respected, not erased. Thank you for being here with me, and with history, on this journey. I'm Professor, someone who tells old stories with a fresh breath. And I believe history isn't just for remembering, it's for understanding, and for loving better. If you saw even a little bit of yourself in these stories, or if you know someone who needs to hear them, hit that subscribe button on Boring Becomes Fun, and stay with me for the next series. Because history has never been boring. Sometimes it just needs to be told, with heart. See you in the next chapter.